Welcome to episode 5.
Learning to play the flute will put you in a good mood for the rest of the day because the flute is the most cool, the most fun, the most beautiful of all instruments in the whole world. We're here to tell you you can do it, and Rebecca will show you how, step by step all along the way. She's a curly-headed blonde with a talent for teaching. Introducing the Learn Flute Podcast. Take it away, Rebecca.
Well, welcome back here to the Learn Flute Podcast. I'm Rebecca Fuller, the expert over at LearnFluteOnline.com, and I'm excited to help you learn even more about playing the musical instrument flute. Now, in this podcast series, I take pieces and parts of the videos, audios, and articles that are all part of my learning program and discuss them even more here with you. Feel free to join the discussion by finding the show notes over at learnfluteonline.com / and then just enter the episode number you're looking for. I started these numbers at 001, 002, 003, etc. This is episode 005, so you can find these exact show notes at learnfluteonline.com / 005, where you can leave comments, ask questions, read or re-listen to this episode. Now it's all here just for you and your learning enjoyment. So let's get right into it today. When students are just getting started playing the flute, or if they've been playing for some time, they will often get really mesmerized by the fancy-looking flutes that they see. And now, by fancy, today I'm going to address those little holes that you see in the keys of my flute when you're watching one of my videos. So I get a lot of people who ask me about this. And perhaps you already know about these, but for those of you who are curious, let's dive right in. I get this question asked often: do I need an open hole flute? And is that considered intermediate level? So here's the short answer. No, you don't need an open hole flute. But if you'd like one, you can have one. Either way, the flute will play for you as well as you know how to play it. There's the key. So what are those holes for anyway? Well, I recently did some research on this, and the bottom line was that the French invented this idea of putting these little holes in the tops of the keys for a couple of different reasons. One reason being that it kind of forces the student to have a better hand position. Now, I really wish that this were 100% the case, or I would require all of my students to have open hole keys. There are still so many ways to mess up your hand position. Because, hey, we're human. But the good part of being human is that we can learn, and the best way to learn to be effective on an instrument is to learn to play with the most natural hand position as possible. So if placing your fingertops in those little holes helps you keep your fingers in the right spot, then great. Now, one thing you probably didn't know is that a flute with open holes is usually an indication that it's a step up in flute level. Now, what I mean by this is that it would usually be titled an intermediate flute, quote unquote. Now, this is just saying that these flutes perhaps have better mechanism or are made with higher quality materials. But more and more flutists are choosing a closed hole option for their flutes nowadays. And I might even surprise you by saying that there is virtually no difference whatsoever in tone or sound quality. Does that surprise you? Well, that's okay. I still know that a higher level flute generally will have more silver on it. The real silver. Now, most flutes are nickel with a silver plating on it. But the deeper the silver goes and the higher quality of it and the mechanism, the more of it you have on your flute, the better chance you have of getting a deeper volume on that flute. That is only if you've been trained to do so. So those are some little details about that. Now let's backtrack just a second or two and let's look at these questions that we had for today. Do I need an open hole flute? And is an open hole flute considered intermediate? Well, here's a little more on this. You can play an open hole flute if you want to. I prefer the holes myself for a couple of reasons. Number one, the open holes tend to be found on the higher quality flutes in many and most, but not in all cases. So I like to feel that I'm being able to find a more variety of higher quality flutes in the open hole models. And I really like to play some jazzy sounding slides in jazz music and traditional modern Irish music, some of the things I just love. And I really can create those cool slides with those open holes. I can still do that on a closed hole flute, but I find it easier on my open hole flutes. Now, in regards to the second question of, is an open hole flute considered intermediate? Well, this used to be more true than it is nowadays. I have young students who've ordered their flutes in student models and that they still have the open holes. One thing that makes this great is that we don't have a transition phase later on with their fingers. And I also have advanced students who don't prefer the holes at all. Now, more and more flute makers are starting to provide options for closed hole flutes in the higher quality silver and gold versions in the advanced models. So that's kind of a cool thing. It's totally true. You basically can order a flute with or without those open holes. Just remember that the quality of the materials makes the difference, but the biggest difference is the player. And that's a wrap. I hope I was able to answer a question you may have had about open and closed hole flutes and whether you really need one or not. If you have a question you'd like me to answer here on this Learn Flute podcast, you can speak right into your computer and send it to me by going over to learnfluteonline.com/feedback. I have a link there that will take you to a fancy but really easy to use button where you can just talk it right to me, sends it to me right on an email. I'll get those and put those in queue. And I'd love to help you out in any, if not all, of your flute learning questions. Join us in this conversation over at learnfluteonline.com website by finding this episode at /005. We'll see y'all next time.
Thanks for listening today. Remember that this is where people of all ages, such as you, can come, learn, and play the musical instrument flute in an easy-to-follow, organized manner, and in the privacy and comfort of your own home, on your own schedule.